What is going on, everyone, and welcome back to the Beamer Barn. We have a special video today because we are going to be looking at and test driving this LS swapped E91 wagon. I'm here with the owner today, Jake, and he's going to be giving us a walk around and full tour of the car, and then we're going to take it for a nice test drive and see what this thing can do. So without further ado, let's go ahead and get into the video. So Jake, this is your car right here?
Yes, sir.
How long have you had it?
I've had it about 8 months now.
Okay. And what made you want to buy an LS swapped car? Because you didn't do this swap yourself, did you?
Correct.
Okay, so what made you want to buy an LS swapped BMW?
So I had a single turbo N54 E91 that I purchased a little over a year ago now, and it just had a lot of issues that I didn't really want to address. So an LS kind of solved all those problems and made double the horsepower.
Shit, you said N54 swap, single turbo wagon.
Yep.
Well, a lot of times it can be hit or miss when you get into someone else's project, you know,
Yeah,
whether it was correctly done before you or whether it's done shittily. But this car here was built by, you said, a fabricator, right?
Yeah, he works for FabBot up in Minnesota.
Okay.
So he has access to a lot of the parts.
So do they specialize in like BMW swaps or LS swaps or just straight up all around fabrication?
K-swaps and LS swaps seems to be mainly what they're going for.
Okay, okay.
So they make a lot of adapters for transmissions to those cars and all kinds of small stuff that you wouldn't really think of until you're at that point in the swap.
Right, right. And there's already some support for like the products that you can use to like get into one of these swaps, right? Like what kind of engine mounts did you say it had?
It's they're Michaels mounts from Texas. It's E9X or LSE9X.com is where you can get them at.
Okay, and so tell me a little bit about the drivetrain. Like, what motor is it, and what sort of work is done to it, and then we'll go from there into the drivetrain.
So it's basically a Chevy 2500 engine. It's a LQ4 block with LQ9 rotating assembly. It's got a BTR Stage 2 cam for boost, BTR lifters, BTR push rods, BTR springs.
Right. Because it's boosted, right?
Yep.
And what sort of turbo is it?
It's a VS Racing 7875. Makes around 850 wheel. On E85, that's on 22 pounds. On 12 pounds, it makes about 630.
The headers, like the turbo manifolds, are those custom to make it fit inside, to make that turbo fit inside the engine bay?
Yep, the guy that built the car, he custom made the manifolds for the turbo.
That's cool. Yeah, I mean, it's definitely like kind of a tight fit in that engine bay.
Very tight.
A lot of motor, not a lot of car.
Yeah.
But this is a 328xi, so this is an X-Drive chassis, right?
Correct.
Okay, cool. So is it still 328i parts, or have you gone and upgraded some of the other components besides, you know, outside the engine? Like, what kind of suspension is it running? What kind of brakes does it have?
So it's still got the X-Drive BC coils. It's got the X-Drive front subframe.
Okay.
It's got the hubs in the front for the wheel speed sensors, because the Holly will read the wheel speed sensors for the traction control. It does have 335 brakes as well.
Okay. So front and rear 335 brake, coilovers,
Yep.
Still the X-Drive front subframe.
Yep.
What kind of transmission and drive shaft and differential and axles do you have?
So it's got a TR6060 out of a ZL1 Camaro. It's running a clutch from FabBot. It's a single disc, but it's holding up the power. It's a roughly 900 horsepower clutch.
Okay.
And then it's got a one-piece steel drive shaft, 8.8 Ford rear end with a Eaton TrueTrack LSD.
Okay.
And then G-force axles.
Why don't you pop the hood for us, and then let's take a look in the engine bay. You can show us some of the, you know, some of the work that was done to the motor. So this is an LQ4. What makes an LQ4 different from like an LS motor?
So the LQ4 is a iron block rather than aluminum.
So it makes it heavier, right?
A little bit.
Okay.
About 60 to 80 pounds, roughly.
But is it easier to find or cheaper to find?
A lot easier, a lot cheaper. It's about a $1,000 motor rather than a $8,000 motor.
Okay.
LS3 would be about 8 grand.
But it doesn't have LQ4 internals, does it?
No, it's got LQ9, so it's got a little bit shorter rods and a little bit stronger pistons.
And you have some accessories on there as well that you had to kind of fit, because these motors come in a lot of different configurations. So
Yep.
in order to make the engine fit with like compressor and alternator and stuff like that.
The accessories, the front accessories are from a CTS V1. And then the oil pan is out of a 2000 Camaro. And then he welded in some baffling just so it keeps good oil pressure. It's got a 1000cc injectors, that's the MSD ignition coils.
Because this LQ4 motor, it originally came out of what cars, or
Came out of a Chevy 2500, like an Escalade.
Oh, okay, so like a
6.0.
truck. Okay,
Yep.
cool. And what about this turbo here? What kind of turbo did you say it was?
So it's a VS Racing 7875.
Okay.
They go for about $1,000, but they seem to be pretty bang for the buck. It's what the LS guys use.
Yeah, well, I like how the engine bay is laid out. It's definitely a tight squeeze in here. You know, it's cool to see some of the intermixed parts between like the factory power steering reservoir, but also like an aftermarket expansion tank. But you see like the factory fan, which is cool, and the hood dump. That's definitely one of the most eye-catching things that you see because it dumps through the hood, but it actually has a full exhaust. How does that work? Because I see a hood dump, but it does have a full exhaust system, right?
Yep. So the idea was to go full exhaust on it, but he got into tuning it and it wasn't able to make the power he was looking for. The turbo wasn't really spooling up because the 3-inch exhaust was too restrictive. So he put a hood dump in it, and then that lit the turbo right up, and he was making, you know, 800 horsepower instead of 500-600.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense because the exhaust tip looks kind of quiet,
Yeah.
you know, kind of small for all the motor and all the noise that you get out of this thing. I mean, we got to hear it cold start earlier and that thing chopped, right?
Yeah.
Because it's got cams in it, you said?
Yeah, it's got a BTR stage 2 cam. So as soon as you give it gas, as soon as the turbo makes 0.1 psi, it opens up that valve.
Oh, so that's what that big valve is for right there.
Yep.
So it'll open it up once it's getting any sort of boost so that there's no restriction on the turbo whatsoever.
Yep.
Very cool. So that's cool. But then the wastegate is an external wastegate as well. So even if you didn't
Right.
have that hood dump, or let's say if you wanted to, you could probably take off that vacuum line and that way it would keep that hood dump closed.
Yep.
But then the wastegate dump would still open when you hit wastegate pressure.
Correct.
Okay. From what we heard there, it was kind of loud, you know, it kind of
Yeah.
makes some good noise there, but I'm very curious to hear what it sounds like when you're on the gas, so I can't wait to test drive it really soon. But let's go ahead and look inside the car because I know it's got some stuff going on with the instrument cluster custom work, and it's got a really nice interior, so why don't we take a look inside there. So the interior looks really clean in here, but I noticed that the instrument cluster is not the original one. It doesn't even look like a 335 cluster, although it kind of does. What sort of solution is that for the swap?
So it's a 335 cluster. Bill G did it for me over at Clusters and Coating. I guess he's done quite a few LS clusters, but basically he kind of takes most of the warnings out so that the dash looks pretty clean. And then he puts these overlays over the face, so it's still just a factory 335. It just looks a little bit different.
But I see that you also have a Corvette shift knob in there too, right? So is this a 5-speed or a 6-speed transmission?
So it's a 6-speed, and it's this is the Camaro shift knob. I guess he left it on there.
Oh, okay,
But,
Camaro
I
shift
mean,
knob.
It feels good. It swap cars, you know, they never feel right.
Yeah, and it's
But-
really convenient that it fits perfectly, like the spacing of the motor with the transmission, that it fits perfectly in that opening for the factory shifter.
So he actually had to do some fabricating to get that shifter in that location, but I'd say he did a pretty good job.
Yeah, no, he definitely did do a good job. So what is it like from a perspective of electronically with the car? Is it easy to like check what fault codes are on the motor? Can you communicate with the other modules on the car? You know, what does that look like?
So I believe you can only connect to like the FRM, but as far as the DME goes, you can't connect to it and any scan tool.
So the LS motor is controlled by a Holley standalone, right?
Yep.
You can go through and review data logs through that,
Yeah,
right?
you can hook up a laptop. There's a USB you can plug into your laptop, do data logs, adjustments to the tune, anything like that.
But otherwise, you're not getting a misfire code or a
No.
bad high pressure fuel pump on this thing, are you?
No.
But the air conditioning works.
Yeah, it just works like factory.
The heater works
Click it on. Yep, factory, just all through a CAN bus system.
through the CAN bus system. So that's
The,
kind of
BMW CAN bus talks to the Holley. And
talks to the Holley.
has inputs and outputs on it.
Okay, so there is something that is connecting the brain of the motor with now the rest of the skeleton of the car.
Right.
Because usually the DME on a BMW would be like the brain, it does the most. But this car being an all-wheel drive car before, because I remember when I did my swap, it was throwing a lot of lights. Does this car have any lights related to doing the swap?
Unfortunately, because it's an all-wheel drive car, it does. If it was rear-wheel drive, then it wouldn't talk to the DME, and then it would just work. But unfortunately, this is looking for, I believe, some kind of input from the DME.
Okay, because it does have the DXC still. I would think that, just like I did the DSC conversion on my car, if you wanted to, you could do the DSC conversion on this car, right? I mean, it's just a module, the wiring for it, the brake lines, and then anything related to like all-wheel drive systems, you wouldn't have to get any lights for. Well, this thing is really cool. Let's go ahead and look at the fuel system.
Yeah, so it uses the stock 328 tank and the stock pump from the 328, but then it has two 425 Walbros in this little surge tank, and it holds about a gallon of fuel, 2 gallons of fuel roughly. So if you're ever in like a quarter-mile pull or anything, you have plenty of fuel.
Okay.
So you don't have to worry about starving it.
What is a surge tank for then? For those of us not familiar.
So basically, when you floor it, and all your fuel sloshes to the back of the tank. That doesn't really happen in this because it's so small and so tight in there. It'll never starve the fuel pump.
Okay, so you're saying that the fuel first comes out of the normal pump setup into this small tank.
Yep.
And this tank is always full. So no matter what, even if you have a quarter of a tank there, this is gonna be 100% full so that there's no sloshing in case you're doing like a hard pull or something.
That's correct.
Which makes sense. I mean, when you've got 630 horsepower, you're gonna pull some serious G's there. So cool, Jake, I appreciate you showing us around the car. Why don't we go ahead and get some sound clips of the car, and then we'll go for a test drive. Find out if the AC works, huh?
Yeah.
I see the little temperature gauge in the vent.
I had it working about 4 or 5 months ago.
Suspicious about that AC.
Yeah. And then it also has to be on a tune for the AC.
Oh, it's gotta be tuned for the AC.
Like there's a...
Because you would probably want to disable it for a high horsepower map, right?
Yeah.
All right, Jake, well, I appreciate you. Go ahead and show me this car. And it is actually for sale at the time that we're making this video. Jake's trying to feel out and see if anyone is interested in picking up this car next. There's still a ton more life left in this thing. It's got a ton of power and more tuning potential as well. And if you guys enjoyed this video, be sure to let me know with a like or a comment down below. And if you're new to the channel, consider subscribing. Usually we're swapping BMW motors into BMW cars, but I really wanted to get my hands on this thing today because I've never driven an LS swap BMW before, and I really appreciate the opportunity to experience this. So as always, I hope everyone has an amazing day, and we will see you in the next video.